Hello. I was just journaling about self-improvement and my relationship with it, the evolution of that. And this is such an interesting and poignant topic, I think. So I wanted to blab it here to you as well. I am someone who has been pathologically driven to improve myself. It's interesting. Some people who are like this wind up being extremely prideful of it, and just very identified with it and continue to be bought into it. And other people, at a certain point, myself included, simply cannot deny that it's like, okay, this is obviously a feature of my personality, and that doesn't mean that, it can never change or something like this. But what I mean is that this isn't something that I'm totally choosing in an unbounded, unpressurized way. If I'm really honest with myself and really look at this, it is the manifestation, it is the behavioral manifestation of an extraordinarily strong driving fear that I will not survive if I don't change myself. And essentially, not only if I don't change myself, but if I don't change myself such that I become impressive to other people, such that I get rewarded. And that's the thing, is that living in what I call resume culture, we're taught to be completely motivated by reward and punishment, and in some ways our lives do come to materially depend on that. There is no wonder at all why people-pleasing is as big of a problem as it is. The vast majority of us have to be in the good graces of our bosses and landlords and whoever else, depending on their largely arbitrary preferences for how we behave. We have to stay in bounds of those people's approval to literally survive. And so, in a cultural context where you're not free to be in right relationship with the land, such that it feeds you and gives you water and gives you what you need, and you give it what it needs, and similarly, in a situation where you're not able to be in right relationship with other people as well, you're not able to form real supportive community, because all of your time is being spent attempting to make money by this impressiveness thing, trading your value, what some entity outside of yourself considers your value. You're spending your time trading that for money so that you can live in a house and eat food and spend time with your friends and family in the margins of that. In a cultural context like that, where instead of your rewards coming to you in a natural and coherent way that give you true feedback about your behavior, right? Because if you do live in right relationship with nature, there are better and worse ways to do things. There are better and worse things to eat. There are processes and behaviors that work more and less well for any given person at any time of year, given your resources, etc. And life will give you that feedback. It's not as if there is no improving to do at any time. However, we are ostensibly totally cut off from that feedback system and instead have in place a feedback system of punishment and reward that is arbitrated by this culture, which is more or less unaware of the fact that it only exists in this broader context of nature. And we are still receiving that feedback, right? That's what climate change is. That's what extreme weather events are. That's what pollution is. That's what wealth inequality is. That's what all these complex issues with refugees and migrants, that's what all of that is. That's what COVID was, in my opinion, the extent to which it affected people. All of these things are that true, real feedback of nature, of the real context in which we are sorry, I don't want to use two prepositions. Anyway, we are receiving that real feedback, but we all culturally have been doing that, for quite a while now, a couple thousand years. Not all of us all over the earth, but that, and don't get me wrong, I just caught I realized that could sound like I'm considering myself not someone who has participated in this delusion. I am 100% someone who participates in this delusion. I'm like trying to engage in a process of undiluting myself, but it is indeed a process. So we collectively in Western culture have been wearing our earmuffs, have been wearing our noise-canceling headphones, while the truth of nature, the truth of the reality in which we live, has been trying to speak to us, right? And what I've come to realize is that so many dimensions of self-improvement, especially the ones that are popularized in self-help books and encouraged in this culture, are purely in service of that destructive status quo. They essentially allow you to do this better. And when everybody does that, we collectively move further and further away from any sort of coherent way of relating to reality. So it occurred to me that so much of what we consider self-improvement is just sort of self-improvement for conformity. Improvement is not even the word, but the elaborate pursuit of conformity. Because the price of not conforming is extremely high. Again, because of the false moral structure that's set up by the reward and punishment. Like, if you are sufficiently rewarded for certain behavior and sufficiently punished for other behavior, you will develop a belief about what is right and wrong. A lot of people are unpacking trauma around this, that they were raised with, whether in their families of origin or in their churches or just in the cultures they were raised in. But that gives me a thought of like, okay, so what would self-improvement for revolution be? What would self-improvement for living in an actually better way be? And what's interesting there is that, in my view, actually living in a better way is not an individual endeavor at all. And kind of step one is being a bit honest with yourself about that, and honest with other people, I think. And recognizing that no matter if you're super sexy and you have a lot of money and you, whatever else, your morning routine is solid, even if all that's true, if you don't have anybody to love you, and if you aren't connected to other people in the earth, like, you're not going to be having a very good time. That's simply the way it is. And it's like, how much more polluted with strife and squalor and various things does the commons have to become? How much more full of suffering and disconnection does the world that we look out and see have to become before it starts to become a little bit of a silly question to think, how can I personally rise above this? How can I create the perfect morning routine and get my gym membership and count my macros and use the Calm app and, what do I have to do to feel good, right? Like, at what point does that start to sound a little silly? And at what point do we start asking ourselves, okay, wait, I think we may have to a little bit work together on this one, everybody. And I apologize for being so facetious. It's like, it's one of these things that it's truly extraordinary, the degree to which we all have had the wool pulled over our eyes about this, and myself included. Like, I never intend to sound superior, you know what I mean? It's like, I am in the process of dismantling all this for myself. But yeah, it's like, okay, what would actual improvement be? And I think there is a place for, I still meditate every day. I have meditated pretty much every day for, I'm about to turn 31, so for 12 years. And I'm so lucky and grateful for that. But essentially, meditation is a super interesting example of how one practice can be done in the service of self-improvement for conformity or in the service of self-improvement for revolution. To me, meditation is the practice of awareness. Many people define meditation as more of a focus practice. Or a lot of people use meditation for the purpose of observing things and knowing that they're not going to respond to that, like categorically not responding to emotions or thoughts or things like this. And like I say, I still meditate and I find it tremendously valuable. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh was meditating. He's one of the most famous meditation teachers in the world. He was meditating while protesting the Vietnam War, you know. For me, the value is in the clarity, and it helps me be a lot more spacious to sort of like respond in an intelligent way rather than in an overwhelmed way, even though, I mean, no, I'm still getting overwhelmed all the time, but meditation helps a little, right? But it's like any one of these things, meditation, yoga, exercise, eating healthy, studying things, learning, you know, all of these things can absolutely help make you kind of maximally available to serve the world, you know, to speak the truth, to show up and help others, etc., things like this. These kinds of actions that contribute to the health of the kind of collective body that we all are, which is the planet that we live on, you know? And so in a sense, it's true, it's absolutely true that there are things that we can do to improve our lives, you know, but that is approaching it from such a different angle than I'm gonna bend over backwards and just become an absolute contortionist to get my little workout in before my 40-hour-a-week job that contributes to the destruction of the world. One more point I want to make on this is that I think that our need to believe that the solution to everything is self-improvement, well, yeah, it's just a product of an extremely individualistic culture, right? But a side effect of that is almost inevitable if you're sufficiently bought into that, and if the majority of people are sufficiently bought into that, it just causes you to be so prone to being extremely judgmental of yourself and other people, and frankly, fairly uncritical about the way that things actually work and the way that things actually come to be as they are. It makes you fairly unobservant. It's sort of like, well, it's actually very like, so one very central tenet in a lot of cults, especially modern cults, is the law of attraction. Because once you believe that you and you alone are the sole cause of everything that's happening to you, you then become extremely easy to abuse and control, because you won't be able to recognize abuse and control tactics as such. You will conceptualize everything that's happening as being the result, the fruit of your actions. So it becomes this really solipsistic, self-referential form of perception that's super paranoid as well. Like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? And so being bought into the law of attraction in a cult is like a much more severe version of what we all experience in individualistic self-improvement culture, we are all conditioned to think that the outcome of our lives is simply the result of what we have chosen to do or not do. And it makes it really difficult for us to see the degree to which we are being affected by the toxicity of the culture. And we constantly turn it back around on ourselves and are like, well, I do use my phone too much, which it's like, absolutely, if you can limit using your phone, do it. I 100% feel better when I can manage to use my phone less. But the phone example is actually quite poignant because, so take another addiction, alcohol. There's a certain percentage of people who have identified about themselves very bravely that they cannot drink alcohol in a balanced way. And so they become sober. And anyone who is a former alcoholic will tell you that they can't, that's the whole thing, is they can't just have one, right? There's some mechanism within them, brain chemistry, trauma, etc. They can't just have one. So they do this extremely brave thing of being completely sober and identifying as a sober person and not drinking, despite the social pressure, despite the norms, etc. So that's hard enough, right? Like, that is hard enough to be someone like that. But then you take something like a cell phone, and you need it for work. I used to clock in and out for work on my cell phone and used Trello, right? Used a system of organization on my phone. I've had many jobs like this that absolutely required my phone. Every assignment that I did in college was due on a computer. So if you can we really expect everyone, like, okay, so we're going to make these things, literally, we're going to engineer these things to be as addictive as possible. We're going to literally have behavior scientists actively researching how to make your phone as addictive as possible and get you as glued to it as possible. And there are going to be people who, for whom this is not very tempting. There are going to be people who can somewhat successfully put a lot of energy into resisting the temptation. I would say I'm more in that category. Like, I way overuse my phone. I despise how much I use my phone. But for example, I have an app called Minimalist Phone that makes it a little bit less flashy. It makes it significantly less flashy, and just less tempting. And then I try not to use it first thing when I wake up. I try not to use it try not to use it before I go to bed. But I fail at that at times. And then there's gonna be a large percentage of people, especially younger people, who grew up with a screen in front of their face, who are going to be a bit parallel to the situation of the alcoholic. If they have access to this thing from birth, their nervous system is almost intertwined with it, right? Is it really a reasonable expectation to be engineering these things to be as addictive as possible, give them to children, right? Then when people have perverse relationships with them later on, be like, everything is ultimately your responsibility. Here is a book on improving your habits, right? And I'm not saying that we should ban phones or something like this, but I am saying that we need to have an honest conversation collectively about all of these addictive rabbit holes. That's a whole other video, but it's like there's 1,000 interlocking addictive rabbit holes that comprise this culture. And we are perversely expected to kind of exist in all that and be successful, but even what we're told is successful is another addictive rabbit hole, workaholism, and being addicted to the way that you appear to other people and the way that you're regarded and all of this. And we are told that we're supposed to exist healthily in this, and that that's all up to us, right? And that is what self-improvement is for you to make the best choices possible on an individual level, right? And it's like, how ridiculous, how fine do the margins have to become that you have to, your self-improvement, I opened my wrong eye, that's funny. How fine do the margins have to become that you have to exist within, and you have to manage your time perfectly, and you have to stay perfectly sober, and you have to keep your thoughts pure, and you have to, all of it. How fine do the margins have to become before we have a conversation about why we are making the margins so fine? Well, this has been a very unexpectedly long and meandering blab about the limitations of self-improvement. So I really appreciate you listening, and I'll talk more about this for sure. Thank you very much. I will see you next time.